So chapter 24, the chapter where we are going to see worlds colliding. In previous chapters, we saw exploration taking place. Well, now we're going to see extensive interaction between the two hemispheres, which will never obviously be undone. The Europeans are going to be bringing in new technologies, and they are going to be able to exploit divisions among different groups of the indigenous people. You add in diseases, and the Europeans as a whole are going to start to dominate the hemisphere. Let's look at how they did that. The first place is in the Spanish Caribbean. No different than what we see as the Caribbean today. The most powerful group in the Caribbean when the Spanish got there was a group called the Taino. The Taino were no different than basically anything else of what we think. They fam maniac. They lived in small villages under the authority of local chiefs. They had sailed through basically the Caribbean. I mean, it's not an empire by any stretch of the imagination, but they did have pretty good control of the region, and they were the dominant trading partner in the region. When the Spanish get there in 1498, they're going to establish Santo Domingo, which is the Spanish capital on the island of Hispaniola, which is the modern-day location of Haiti on the western part and the Dominican Republic on the eastern part. And the original plan was to build trading posts throughout the regions, and then they start to trade glass and beads and metal tools with the locals. However, the Spanish quickly realized that they don't have anything actually the Europeans wanted. And so they first are going to try to mine gold in the system, and that really is how they're going to start to develop this encomienda system, and that is going to be a key for this chapter, the encomienda system. It's going to be the labor system that gets developed. So they're getting the Taino to work in the fields. The settlers were supposed to look after the health of the workers, the welfare, and try to get them to be Christian. In reality, all they really got was the basics of living. And we're going to learn way more about this in the Council of the Indies reading as well. The Taino would revolt from time to time, but the Spanish guns were just too much. But that is not what killed most of the people in the Caribbean. It's smallpox. Smallpox is going to wipe out millions of people. There were about 4 million people living in the Caribbean when Columbus got there in 1492. And 50 years later, there's about 50,000. There's about 50,000. As time moves forward here, the Caribbean is going to see a change. The next slide is going to be all about the Spanish leaving the Caribbean because it didn't have a ton of those resources. The encomienda system is going to be in place, and that's even going to move in place into the mainlands as well. But the Caribbean is going to see more sugar and later tobacco farming, most of it done through slavery. So let's move on to the mainland. Moving on to the mainland, both the Aztecs and the Incas are a huge empire. I mean, they are definition of empires through and through. They have centralized authority, mass populations, they're collecting taxes and tributes, they have ways to get labor, massive building projects, and they also have tons of resources. So what the Spanish did not get in the Caribbean, they're going to be able to find here. First, in Mexico, Hernan Cortez is going to start attacking the Aztecs in 1519 to 1521. He's going to bring 450 soldiers with him into Mexico. Notice, he's attacking the massive empire of the Aztecs with 450 people. Goes to Lake Texcoco, where Tenochtitlan is, and he captures Montezuma and captures him, and then Cortez would take Tenochtitlan under siege and starve the city under its new leadership, and they're just going to take over. Now, their technology is part of it, but then remember, smallpox is also spreading throughout it. Now, Cortez is also really good at something else. Cortez is able to plan the division of the people, and the people who didn't like the Aztecs, he gets those people on his side. So he gets the other groups who didn't like the Aztecs on his side, and he has better technology. But again, you also have smallpox spreading throughout, and that's it. So notice, I haven't even said the word guns. The Europeans had the guns, but they didn't hit anything. They're muskets, and they're big, loud bangs, pretty much. They might hit something every once in a while. But the steel swords and the horses are the way bigger advantage. Then if we go down to what we now know today as Peru and Pizarro, Francisco Pizarro, he had 180 soldiers when he arrived there, and he got some reinforcements while he was there. He was there from 1532 to 1533. And he got his soldiers up to about 600. The Incas are coming off a huge civil war. The winner of the civil war is Atahualpa. Atahualpa won the battle with his brother Huascar for power. And Pizarro starts taking over much the same way you saw with Cortez, that he does have better technology again, but smallpox is spreading. And Pizarro has the advantage of the Incas are just coming off a civil war. Pizarro plays off this fact. He gets them all the Incan leadership to be in one spot and kills all of them except Atahualpa. And he gets Atahualpa to deliver to him so he doesn't kill him 2 rooms full of gold and a room full of silver. And then when he's done, he decapitates him. So basically this shows you, notice I didn't say anything about Christianity. If you remember, the natives, are the Europeans' reasons for exploration were God, gold, and glory? Well, I've heard a lot of glory and I've heard a lot of gold so far. And so at this point, the natives in the Americas are basically, in the western or in the southern part, are done. The Aztecs are gone, the Incas are gone, and now the Spanish have to figure out how they're going to rule. By 1570, they do have complete control. At first, land was given to the soldiers of Pizarro and Cortez, but slowly but surely the Spanish crown and the bureaucrats are going to take over. It's pretty difficult to govern this area. It takes 2 years to get a message back and forth to Spain. It's just not very effective. Eventually what they do is they put a viceroy in charge, a viceroyal, a person in place of. And they are in charge, they answer directly to the king. In New Spain, which is modern-day Mexico, or what will be modern-day Mexico, basically occupies the same land. They're going to build Mexico City on the top of where Tenochtitlan was. Now, the viceroys over time, the Spanish government is afraid that these people are going to leave and become independent countries, and with transportation and communication being so difficult, the king puts in a new group of people to just help keep the viceroys in place, and it's a group of people loyal to the king called the audiences. And they act as review boards. They're going to hear appeals of viceroy decisions. They're going to conduct reviews of how the viceroy is doing. Notice here, you also have and by the way, those viceroys, they're in both New Spain and in what we now know today as Peru. You're going to see new cities out there, such as Mexico City gets built, St. Augustine gets built, what we now know today as Florida, Lima, Concepcion, Buenos Aires. It didn't matter what you did, by the way, you lived in the city. Part of the reason was protection. So the cities are very much European, where the rural areas are very much indigenous. In rural areas, the Europeans are going to basically assimilate into the culture of the natives that were left. Indigenous languages especially are going to thrive in Mexico, Paraguay, and Peru. Now, I haven't talked about Portugal yet. Portugal is going to capture Brazil and make that their colony. And they start sugar plantations. That is sugar plantations through and through for the Portuguese. Eventually, the Brazilians and the Portuguese don't really want to compete against each other, and so they signed the Treaty of Tordesillas, which I know we talked a little bit about, but you can see here, here's how they divided the world. This is the Portuguese area of dominance. This is the Spanish area of dominance. So notice, like, Spain, for instance, is going to control the Philippines in the Eastern Hemisphere, and Portugal, and they'll keep Brazil in the West. But then everything on the outskirts of that, so we now know today is North America and the rest of South America is Spanish. And this is for trade influence. They agree basically not to mess with each other in those parts. Let's go to North America for a second. In North America, they basically are trying to find a way to get to Asia. They're looking for new resources throughout. Port Royal, which is in modern-day Nova Scotia, the Dutch are going to build New Amsterdam in 1623, but in 1664, the English seize it, and that becomes New York City. Basically, all the cities here are on waterways, whether that is the French are building fur settlements along the St. Lawrence, Ohio, and the Mississippi rivers. The British stay on the Atlantic Ocean. Private citizens are holding more power here because they're not necessarily backed up by the government. So they don't expect people to survive on agriculture. This is very different than what we saw down in the southern part. You're going to see more people are going to trade for fur and for tar and lumber. And so you're going to send a lot of it back, and you're also going to trade with people there. Now, Native Americans in North America, the groups were significantly smaller. There is no Aztecs, there is no Incas, significantly smaller groups. And hunting and gathering was pretty common. So the Europeans justified the land by saying they're taking the land to make it more productive. They saw hunting as more of a leisure activity. So when we're leaving here, and when we're leaving at this point, natives are really out of power. And what you see here is you got the purple is Spanish rule. Green is English. This bluish color is French. This is Portuguese, and this is Dutch. And so natives are gone. At this point, you're starting to see major economics start to come into play. And as we move forward, we're going to start to see mining come into more play and trading over both oceans.